Welcome to this conversation celebrating 100 years of biodynamics. It is an honor to welcome Harald Hoven into the room, who is a lecturer and teacher of biodynamics for over 30 years. And he's now more on the retired side, from what I understand. But his hands are still in the soil, his feet are still on the ground, and he's still learning and teaching and sharing about biodynamics all over the world, and most recently in the tropics, where it's percolating questions and curiosity for him about biodynamics and how it's practiced in temperate zones and how it can be maybe modified or maybe fine-tuned or maybe something else for tropical areas. So I'm really excited to take a deeper dive into the biodynamic practices and preparations, where we're using plant medicine and different materials that are easy to find in certain parts of the world, but more difficult to find in other parts of the world. And so how do we bridge the conversation? How do we bridge the practices? And how do we deepen into what's really possible with biodynamics and with working with all of life and Earth's wisdom? So welcome to Heart and Soil, Harald. It is an honor to have you join us today. So thank you for making time.
Yes, good morning. I'm glad to be here with you and share some of my work. So I have been farming here in California for 40 years and apprentice before in Germany. And I was doing deep work with the Rudolf Steiner's agriculture lectures to understand well enough, also to teach my apprentices and others. And during COVID time, I did an online study of the agriculture lectures over 16 weeks. And so we had a chance to go deeper into it. And in this, then I noticed, speaking with people in the tropics who participated too, they didn't quite understand what I was talking or what the course was saying. And then later I had another course with Chinese speakers out of Malaysia, where I was doing questions and answers. And it became clear, they don't really get the picture that's presented in the agriculture course because the topics are so different. Mm-hmm. How can we understand this? First of all, the picture of the agriculture course is that we have this breathing of the earth, that we have this out breath that we are in right now. You could say the earth exhales, and we see it in the flowering and in the abundance of growth that is so strong. Come early fall, then the leaves will change colors, and then they drop, and you see with this sort of an in-breath. It's a wonderful picture that we can, I think anyone like you also in British Columbia, you can see that very clearly and easily understand.
Yeah.
And now you go to the tropics. How is it there? It never ends, it never stops. It always goes. And you may have some trees that may lose leaves at certain times, but for the most part, it's go, go, go. And so how is this? And what is this relationship then to life? And what is this in-breath and out-breath? Do they have that at all? So in a certain way, we can, what they have, the summer and winter, not quite. They have wet season and dry season. But if you think about it, the dry season is a little bit like this stopping, or rather slowing down. And this is, of course, what happens to us in the more temperate climate, stronger. We have, and you in Canada more than we in California, this kind of moving inward and reflecting, and then making new plans for the next year. In the tropics, everything seems to be happening simultaneously, and there's no real break. And the growth of the plants is different too. Think for a moment, certain plants in the tropics, you don't only have the surface of the earth and the life that's within it, you have aerial roots come down. So this zone of fertility that we're used to having in the ground, they have in the atmosphere too. And then think of the certain plants where the flowers come straight out of the trunk. Cacao, that we all love. Flowers push their way through the bark, can you imagine, to the thick bark, and flower and bring us food. So everything is very different. And it seems that everything is mixed. So here we have summer and winter, and these great changes of the lengthening of days and so on. There, it's always about more or less 12 hours. A little bit, a little bit more or less than 12-hour day, 12-hour night. And so it's harder to get a clear idea what happens. And for us, when we make biodynamic preparations, this is always a question. How do we do this? So these preparations that are buried in the earth for us during the winter months, except for the silica preparation. So how can we understand this? So after having done this online course, I was invited then to Malaysia and then to some other tropical places. And then I was facing this and realized, wow, we have something that people can't find in Rudolf Steiner's agriculture lectures, clear answer, because he gave that in Central Europe, Eastern Germany back then, now Western Poland, very different. So in a certain way, I feel now at 100 years old, we need to look at this last frontier for biodynamics, which is really in the tropics. And yes, people are working there with biodynamics, but mostly with imported herbs, dried herbs, that they then make preparations with, and maybe having some plants, but not others. So this is my big theme, has gotten my big theme, because I don't have other pressing issues here any longer. So I can do some more traveling, but also find colleagues who have a similar interest.
What's surprising you most about what you're learning about biodynamics being practiced in the tropics, Harald?
I don't have clear picture. Things work, but these sort of strong images that we have, that in a certain way, I think we rely on having a world that we understand. Yeah, and that we understand and we feel, yes, cool, good, I can go there.
Yeah. And
then in the tropics, it's all gone. And then finding maybe replacement is not easy at all. There's some things that are easier.
What's can I have a couple of questions for you. Can I ask you a question? Yes. Like, I'm curious about your own personal journey and how locked in and committed, and a person could say, the only word that's coming to mind is rigid, and that might not be the right word, but how vigilant were you in the biodynamic practices, and that it had to be valerian, and that had to be chamomile, and that had to be stinging nail, and there's no flexibility? Like, before this awakening, I'm just curious, what was your belief and understanding?
Yeah, so my understanding was not it had to be first, but rather, how can I understand you better? How can I become more of a partner with you? Yeah, and so that I've done that for decades. And so in doing that, then my preparation in a certain way could be better and better, simply by being a partner. And having that as a background, I felt, and later when this question arose, okay, maybe I can come up with alternatives, because I see certain characteristics. I also suggested in my online courses then that people from the tropics need to visit other places to get to know the preparations here, so they see at least what is this like that Rudolf Steiner had suggested, and that may grow well here. And what could it possibly be then in their countries to use? So I had to go very open-minded and not fixed, because it doesn't help. Yeah. And yet we come so quickly to things. Let me give you an example. Oak. Rudolf Steiner suggested for preventing fungal diseases to use the bark of an oak tree. Okay, I think even in British Columbia, you have a hard time finding an oak, right? You have already, it's more rare. You have much
It is more rare.
conifers.
They grow well, but it is more rare. Yep.
Right, right. And so when you look at this tree, massive as it gets, and the solidity that the oak has, and then these acorns, you get certain pictures. And then when you come to another area and you don't have it, and you think, well, what would be maybe similar? What has a gesture too that's not just growing up, but also holding together, which the oak has? And so then there are just always questions, and I had lots of those. And I'm trying to share too with colleagues, with international colleagues.
And what have you found it has been easy to find an alternative for?
Well, even where I don't need to, that's the stinging nettle. And Rudolf Steiner suggested stinging nettle is sort of the central one of all the preparations. It needs to be buried in the earth for a whole year, but it's one that is sort of good for everything and almost helps. It's like the heart in us, the central organ. That organ that regulates everything, keeps everything in balance. And my happy discovery was that I would find stinging nettle almost in any place, even though with different names and different types, and including tree forms. In Central America, I met one that's more of a bush. So there's many different types, but that was there. And I felt, okay, I'm glad, even though not quite everywhere, but in most places I could find something. And in some places, even very nice alternatives. So like in Bali, I was giving a course and people said, yeah, we have nettle. And it was a little thing, little plant, very not tall at all. And when you touched it, not with your the hand, but maybe on the arm where you're more sensitive, I could feel just a little bit something. I thought, this is not the nettle. Nettle has to have this quality of, well, it wants to get in. It can be on your skin and then hurt, but also bring information, speed up processes. And so there was this little thing. I thought, no, we can't do this. I can't make a preparation with this. And then there was one of the participants was a hunter. He said, oh, you mean that plant that stings you real well? I said, yes. And he said, I'll go during break time. And he came back with a very nice stinging nettle full of burning hairs, much more than I've seen in many places. So then I feel, yes. So it's this, in a certain way, what I have to come to in my work is then the feeling is, yes, that's it.
Yeah.
But we have that only with things that we have penetrated somehow enough, and not just, okay, stinging nettle, good for inflammation, maybe against allergies, this and that. Oh, in our culture we have this and that plant, and then we have something maybe that is, theoretically has similar use, but is totally harmless. And sometimes people then, that happens in regions that people say, no, we have a plant here and that will be fine, but it's just no comparison. For instance, I heard in India, people say, yarrow, no, doesn't grow here, but we have a plant we use for the same purpose, and it's kind of, pigweed. I don't know if you have it up there. It's an amaranth, totally, boring plant. Now, if you know yarrow with the very fine leaves, Achillea millefolium, 1,000 leaves, the tiny little, I mean, this is an artist, what an artist. And then you see a pigweed, it's just how, and maybe I would be pressed very hard to say, yes, use it. But couldn't we find something else? So this is the difficult question, and one has to be modest. At the same time, you can't be too bashful, just push ahead and say, we've got it. no, this will take a while.
Yeah, yeah.
This will take a while.
So have you had any aha moments where you found alternatives?
Well, you see, Rudolf Steiner, when he suggested these plants, he had particular genus species plants. And that he saw in Middle Europe, where he lived, as the ideal remedies for different situations. And that's what we first look at. And then there's many different types. Let me go to the oak as an example. So when you think of the well, what we call here the English oak, it's a plant. I show you an example. It's a plant that has an interesting form. And then I read to what Rudolf Steiner was saying about the oak to get maybe an image. Well, what we have on the East Coast is this here. This is a white oak from the East Coast. And if you look here, you see this form. You could imagine this as a hole first, around, but then there's something in the plant, formative forces that pull together and then release, pull together and then release. And when you have this, then you may get a picture of what it is for. I'll read you the quote here in the agriculture course. 1 second. No. All right. So Rudolf Steiner talks now about that we also have to look at plant diseases and how to combat them. And he says, of course, calcium is needed, but it couldn't be calcium just in any form, but it should be a living calcium. And then he had given earlier on in the lectures already a picture of that the tree trunk, if you will, is like a mounted up earth, and that the bark is almost something in between plant and soil. And then he gives, yeah. When we want a rampant etheric life forces development to contract into beautiful and regular manner without any shocks, then we need to use calcium in the particular form in which it is found in oak bark. So he's talking about the bark, but what I just showed you in the leaf is a gesture where you see this again now translated into the leaf. And for me, that is more exciting than if I had to use this is also an oak. I think it's from Taiwan. Yeah. So it's well, it's a little pointed, but it doesn't have this vitality that wants to stream, but then is restricted again and held. So I'll show you a picture of the European one. Yeah, here this is one from Switzerland, a little oak leaf. And you see again this gesture. And then traveling through China, I found this one. And you see it's similar. It's not exactly the same. So I told friends there, well, why don't you make an ash analysis of the bark? Which they did, and it had about 15% calcium in the bark. And this is actually very similar to the Quercus robur, the English oak. I thought, okay, good. That seems to be a good indicator. And seeing the form, I felt confirmed. Yeah. So this is, for me, a nice example of going, but also working with the form. And so in a certain way, you have to be an artist, or you have to be able to go, live in form, and have a sense for form. And so then that helps. But so, I mean, when Rudolf Steiner begins, the first plant that he introduces was the yarrow. And he said, it was like if this sort of plant creator had just the perfect image for this working together of potassium and sulfur. Can I make something of that? Yeah. But anyway, yarrow is an incredible plant. So there's always something you have to look at or try to find then that may help you to get a better understanding.
Mhm. What inspires you and gives you hope about working with biodynamics in the tropics and places where you know some of the plants and animals aren't the same or they're different?
Right, right. Well, I have in some of the countries, particularly I felt Malaysia was interesting. About 10 years ago or a little more, they had a speaker from New Zealand, Hans Mulder, and he introduced biodynamics for the first time to larger public. And people really heard it. And so there was a lot of trying to work with biodynamics, not always with full understanding, but doesn't matter, but at least an interest. And I feel if the interest can persist, then there will be something will happen over time. But there have to be enough people with an inquisitive mind that can go deeper. Because see, our danger is always that we say, give me the recipe, please. And then I do it. And don't leave me alone with it's just too much, I just give me the recipe. And of course, we have to start with the recipe. But we have to individualize it. That was Rudolf Steiner's biggest thing in the agriculture course. The farm individuality, to have this really made specific for your need and your landscape and your place and this working together. And so we have to have enough people who have an artistic mind or that are flexible enough, that is not fixed enough pictures that they can also follow and are research mind at the same time, that they do greater observation. I was in Malaysia 2 years ago when there was the international Biodynamic conference, Asia Pacific Biodynamic conference. And I gave a presentation. I said, what we need right now is similar to what happened right after the agriculture course was given 100 years ago. And that was that farmers said, okay, we're going to try now these preparations that you just suggested. And we take our notes and we share our notes and we work as a team. And then the method can grow. Thank goodness, thank God that there were enough people who did this, so that there was, after a few years, they had enough. I mean, 6 years later, they had enough to start Demeter as a certifying organization, or even less. It was four year. Well, very short time. There was a lot of fire in the people, and they had an inquisitive mind and kept on going. And they were so fired up by these lectures that they did this. So I feel now, after 100 years, in a certain way, we need to start all over for the tropics, because that these lectures were not written for the tropics. Mm-hmm. So in a way, the image of what happens in the tropics needs to be maybe better characterized, and I can't do that. And I have to live there and have to study from an anthroposophical background, from the background that Rudolf Steiner used, to describe this and to see then what are the processes, what is that breathing that you experience stronger in British Columbia than I here, but we experience this breathing and yeah, the dynamic that comes with that. So I hope there will be enough of that there, that there's enough people who are not just saying, give me the recipe.
You talked about, I love how you formulated the thoughts and words of really connecting people to the individuality of their practices with biodynamics. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what you mean by that?
Okay. So I was a vegetable grower. And as a vegetable grower, it's always, how do I, and on small acreage, I did just 3 acres eventually, started with 1 acre. And it's always the question, how do I get the fertility? Vegetables need something all the time. And it's not like you have larger rotations, you put in a year with legumes, and clover and so on. No, you have to get something out all the time and have something for market. So I felt I could not do enough justice to my vegetable growing um, and individualizing. I was making compost, of course, from the plant matter that I had there and the little bit of manure that I had, but it wasn't enough. And so I got into seed saving. And the seed saving helped me to create plants, and I would only grow those plants that did well, that I had bought seeds for, and did well. And said, okay, they like it here. So I would, and they were open pollinated. So I would grow seeds, and I kept doing this. And with some species, some varieties, I did this maybe for 15 generations or more. Can you imagine what happens? It means that the plants become ever more individualized to your land. For the kind of environment, for what the climate gives, the soil type, and my way of working with it. So this individualizing means that you create something that in a way becomes home. And home is something that is solid. That changes too, as we all experience with climate change right now, is challenged, but it has a certain continuity, and you work with this and you try to put your stamp. Yeah, but stamp is almost too hard. Your massaging hand to it to help it to become better and to become more productive. Does that help?
Yeah, that's very, very powerful. And what I also am curious about is how, like, what is what we might call a living question or insight that we can presence on a daily basis, perhaps, that would help us deepen into that deeper connection that you're speaking about.
Right, right. I think what can be very helpful is actually do plant observation and to do them on a daily basis and be still, just have this moment of stillness. 5 minutes is plenty, meaning it's not the length, but the focus. But the focus, that you focus on something, and when you go back there, that you try to bring the image of what you saw last time along with you, and then see, does it coincide, or is it differently today? Have I missed something last time? And that means that the picture of what you're seeing becomes ever deeper and deeper. And you could do, of course, various ways of kind of maybe stages of doing this. But I think even simply by looking at it could be just the tip of growth of a plant, and go to the same, like maybe a little ribbon on there, and go back and then see, did you see everything? And then what you learn, what you come to, is the living gesture, or rather the change, even within the day. And then over time, how this plant gradually changes. And then this is how you explore the etheric, the sphere of life, that it is something that's always in movement, always changing. And I feel this is a great thing, which I have used with people when I did a week-long course. Just go back daily. It's more dramatic, of course, with young plants. Yeah, they just barely come out of the ground. The cotyledons have come out, the two or one germinating leaf, and then you continue. And then to see, and maybe if you have the time, if you can afford to, you can go more than once a day. How is it in the morning? How is it in the afternoon? Yeah, and then to see also this gesture of in-breath and out-breath. Maybe do you see that a little bit? Yeah, morning, of course, out-breath, all the vitality coming from the earth, in the afternoon descending. I feel it's a wonderful way. I haven't done it enough, but it would take certain times.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like I haven't done it enough, and it's actually one of my favorite things to do. And I'm so curious I'm so curious about everyone else's journey in the room here today.
Mhm.
Maybe just if you practice this of
Mhm.
sitting quietly and observing your plants,
Mhm.
drop a one in
Mhm.
the chat. And if this is new to you or it's something that you know about but you haven't done, drop a two in the chat just so we know. One, we got a one. So one if you've sat with your plants before, and two if it's new to you and something that you are learning about. So we have one participant who's going to play with us today. Oh, there's some more people finding the chat. Awesome. Some ones and twos. So cool. Um, and more ones coming in. That's wonderful. It just makes me actually makes me pause, Harold.
Mhm.
That wonder. And I recently attended my daughter's graduation and I got to meet this man on the way there, and he had gone through a health crisis, and he's sharing with me some of his story, and he got so excited because I said what are you most excited about now and what you've learned through your journey? And he said, nature. It's nature. Everything is alive. And I'm not kidding you. He lit up, and I'm pretty sure he lit up the entire plane and all the ethers around us when he said that. And I was like, tell me more about that. He's like, everything is alive. The trees are alive. The plants are alive. The flowers are alive. And if you look, you can actually see it. And it put like it made my heart weep
Mhm.
with gratitude and like awe. And I think that's what you're talking about, that connection.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so powerful. So I'm curious, Harold, like with the biodynamic philosophy of cosmic forces and using plants to bring in different energy and evoke different essences, whether that's disease resistance or healthier roots. I'm curious how how much can we tap into our individuality and our intuition of using what we can use if we don't have dandelion, for example. And dandelion, I've traveled the world a lot, and I'm pretty sure I've seen dandelion and nettle, like you said, almost everywhere in the world. But what if I can't find something, but I really want to practice the essence of biodynamics? Where can I go with that when we bring in the individuality and listening?
Mhm. Mhm. I think it's a process, and of course, what helps, as I said earlier on, to if you know the dandelion in the first place, then you could possibly come somewhere, get somewhere, and what can be helpful is also then to know the relationship that dandelion has to the human organism. So Rudolf Steiner described it actually as a liver plant. It's full of life, but useful, very useful. So it never gets old. If you dig one up, you see the root is bendable. Normally a root is the hardest part in the plant. It stays useful and has this milky juice. So when you have this, then you could look further. Or what has a similar stimulating way? This could be a way. Could there be also, you could, I mean, some people done this, or they look even at the planetary relationship. What planets is related to this? In the dandelion, we look at it, and in a certain way, we could almost see the sun in it. Also, or they're open to the sun, close when the sun is gone. But then also Jupiter. Actually, it's related to Jupiter. And when you have a little more, this might help you more. And then if you have other traditions, maybe where you can tap into, for instance, native cultures, they often have very good relationship to nature and very accurate also.
Mhm.
Uh, but a different language again, and then translating sort of from their perception, or then to find, can we find something there? So I would not rush. And of course, we can do that too. You can just go, that looks like it or whatever, and you just try and then see, nah, or whatever. And so you may learn that way too. And it depends a little bit how you are, what type you are. Of course, you have to be careful. Some things can be offensive,
Right.
you know. But one has to, in a certain way, dare a little bit to see, to get to know them, because when you do that, and then you'll see, oh, that flavor. Oof. I mean, valerian flower juice, for instance, have a little bit of it, of the preparation. It doesn't taste good. It's very intense, but it's, yeah. So one has to see then too, how do I meet this? Do I meet it? And what is it telling me? And of course, we are bred so differently today that we're not sensitive to those things.
Man, that's so powerful. There's so much to pull apart in that, because there's the tenderness of being the observer in biodynamics, right? And so it's not necessarily about rushing ahead and finding the replacement for the yarrow or the oak. It may be even more powerful just to observe and listen and notice what's being evoked. Huh. That's really cool. And then and what I'm also hearing is to learn as much about the what I would call plant medicine, the plants and the parts that Steiner was inviting us to use, to learn as much as we can about those, and then look for the alternatives. And in that, oh boy, my brain just my thought just escaped me. But in that, and when you learn about the qualities, and so it's not just the physical qualities, but it's the energetic qualities, and it's the nutritional qualities of the plants, and finding all of those to come together.
In a way, we have lost so much this capacity. People of old, they had initiation that came through the plants. The plants would call them. Yeah, you can hear that about native cultures, that people felt called by a plant, and it becomes their teacher, a plant. And they would work with this. But as modern human beings, we don't have that any longer. And in a certain way, we have an abyss in a way that we need to get beyond, get to the other side, and just lose everything. So I find it exciting in my life at the space, where I don't have, I'm not pressed to produce something particular right now, or where I can be more in a certain way vulnerable state, and just see, and can I maybe come up with something. And I know it's not just going to be me, and it will be longer. I hope for something in the next 25 years. And that I will not be participating on this in the end. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where I was going with that, when tapping into the full essence of, we'll just use a dandelion, for example, and then with that curiosity and that wonder, looking at our environment around us and what might be calling to us. That's very, very cool, very powerful. Harald, is there a place like an online forum, or a group, or a chat, or anywhere that we can tap into or tune into to learn more about this type of research, so that we can collaborate more together? Is that happening yet?
Oh man, I am dyslexic.
Okay.
So I'm looking a lot. I'm very good at looking.
Yeah.
And do you notice how hard it was for me to get into the program here? Yeah, so I'm stupid when it comes to technology. And so I don't have much. However, there are different people working with plants too, and sort of maybe almost plant spirits who like to be with plants. So one book that I have is by, hold on a second. It's about biodynamics too. How to Move Like a Plant.
Mm.
And this is by Deb Sewell. She's in Maine, and she's a plant. She makes medicine, plant medicine. But she describes, and of course, I haven't read much in it, being a good dyslexic. But so she is just studying, working with the plants, and getting to know them more and more, growing them.
Mm-hmm.
I hope for getting more and more into dialogue with others. That's why I offered this theme too here, because I feel this is a need for the future to come up with alternatives. And I want to share this later with other people too, who work with plants to find ways of deepening. Because, well, I think progress is not just individually made.
Yeah.
It's an exchange. It's an exchange with others and finding others who want to collaborate, who have similar passion, how we make progress. So can't give you a good answer. I wish there were
That's
more.
okay. That's okay. You know what? We're connected with some biodynamic farmers from around the world in different tropical zones. So that is a question that we are going to ask them specifically. And we'll share that in our newsletter. And if there's nothing available, then Leslie, maybe we'll make a note of that so we can like start a conversation or a forum or a discussion thread somewhere so people can start sharing.
Yeah. I have friends, of course, I have international friends who work with in different areas. So for instance, Rolf and Anna Bucher from Germany, they work with Wala, making the remedies there, or growing the plants. And then when they got freed from the work, they traveled a lot to Africa and to Asia and helped preparation making particularly. And they, of course, have a fine, keen eye to seeing plants. So they wrote this book, what is it, preparation making or used worldwide or so, or Bucher, and it comes from the International Federation, Demeter Federation. They are good. So they are colleagues. Then there are other, like in Brazil, women who work with valerian, who managed to make the valerian bloom in tropic at the kind of cusp to the tropical zone, which valerian doesn't like to bloom in the tropics. It grows bushy, no flowers. And so she managed to do this.
Wow.
Yes. So there are people and some other friends in other countries. So that's the thing, to find colleagues. And I would like to do more. And if I manage to go to the International Biodynamic Conference in Dornach, Switzerland, there I can always meet colleagues. But it will be good to have more also here in North America. Where are the people coming from on the here on this call? Are they all North American?
No, they're from all over the world. We have
okay.
in this chat, I have to look again, but we have people from Hong Kong. Leslie, can you see? Bulgaria, France, the UK. I know we have some farmers who join us often from Ecuador and from all over. Pardon me?
Blue Farm is Indonesia, right?
Yeah. And a lot of them practicing biodynamics as well. And looking for different solutions and some of them do bring the preparations in and have traditionally brought the preparations in, like you said, from North America or from wherever they can find them. And they're now looking at what else they can do. And some of them are working with indigenous people who have been part of the land
Right, right.
that they're farming for
Yes.
centuries. So, Harold, what have you found is easy and effortless in biodynamics that people can practice anywhere in the world and where there are no barriers?
Compost.
Compost?
Yes, I feel this is compost to participate in nature and yet bring it to a different level as composting. Anybody can do that. And so, yet you become a participant in a culture where we have everything gets thrown away. And so unless people are already, living in the country and it's part of their practice, I feel composting puts you in touch in a particular way of the processes of nature, but lifted, elevated, because that process happens all the time right at the surface of the earth. The composting, things fall down, and then the soil at the top few inches is the darkest, and then it gets lighter in color, different color. But we now lift that up and control this process and become more productive and more, we generate heat in it. To me, this is the most exciting way of really participating in nature. And then, of course, with the aid of the preparations, we make that even better.
Mm.
Yeah. No matter what scale, really. Of course, large scale, great. And it's an art too, that it works. And in the tropics, you have to watch out once the rain begins to have it covered up or have a roof over it or whatever. Yes.
What you've been practicing biodynamics and composting for decades, and what would you say are your top tips around composting for new people or people who've been composting for a long time?
Yeah, I think to look at it often enough. And what happens so often, people just throw it somewhere, and then after a year or two, they say, "Oh, it should be ready now," and that's not enough. So the more we treat it like family or whatever, or kindly and with attention, the more something will happen in there. And this warmth that we have with our with our fellow human beings, when we have that towards the composting, then we see by having the pile not too stretched out that it doesn't generate warmth or make segments that are always nice and warm and hot, then something much more can happen. And so that's what I suggest. Yeah, I would never give that up. And I normally begin there, and I would tell anybody who wants to be, just even gardening, start with compost, prepare.
Right. And how often?
Not just buy it, not just buy it, make it.
I love that. I love that. And how often would you say to check in on your compost?
Well, for me, it's normally at least every 2-3 days when I when I empty the compost bucket. So it gets on the pile, and it's not big at all. I'm just got backyard, but it's enough to keep it warm in the winter because it's harder, and or even hot. It's like 50 degrees Celsius or more. Then it's good. Then it can transform.
Harold, what do you feel like is the biggest hurdle with biodynamics today in practicing biodynamics?
Well, I would say very simply, we are not used to look at the world as having a spiritual foundation. And when we have that, then everything suddenly was there. There was a bang, and then suddenly everything was there. Before there was nothing, and suddenly it was there. And so the ability not to see in process, but rather sort of fixed, that's our greatest hurdle. And because of that, then we cannot live into processes and development really over time. So when scientists today look at anything, there's just a kind of, you test substances, but you have then a fixed idea, but there's no way of moving. So when Rudolf Steiner introduced Earth evolution, he said this went, or cosmic evolution altogether, this went through stages. And in the beginning, there was the Word, as we know it from this St. John's Gospel. And then the Word became flesh. So in a way, incarnation means getting into the flesh, means coming from the spirit that is just thought, if you will, then gradually condensing through a state of warmth, and then air, and then water into the physical. And if we can go there somehow, embrace that, things will be a lot easier. But we don't have that. We don't have it in our education any longer. So it's very hard to have a natural relationship to that. Different in Bali. If you go there, no problem. People still have that.
Yeah, interesting. And what gives you the most hope today?
Well, our will to survive and not become the machine. Because this is our greatest danger today, that we even want to become the machine. Because the machine can do it even better than we think. And so we get dehumanized. And this gives me, the hope is that we will see that the machine can help. Thank you for having this program with the machine, but that we don't fall sort of for the machine only, without having these capacities. We talked about before, how do we observe nature and kind of counter sort of maybe the death force that the machine only has into something living. If we can have that, and if enough people do that, then we will survive. But otherwise, we could become only the machine.
And what's a question that you wish people would ask you more, that you have never been asked before, or that you aren't asked enough?
Well, I think looking more carefully at nature, into nature.
And what would that look like if we were looking more carefully into nature?
It's like the good man who had been very sick and who got a new lease of life because he did that. Because he realized he was surrounded by life. And when you're surrounded by life, then it nurtures you. And if you don't see it, if your mindset is somewhere else, you only see destruction, or things are self-destructing, and there's no future. So it's only if we see the life and realize that we are surrounded by it, and by the beings, that invisible beings too, that are in there, then there can be a future. But if we don't see that, then there's no future. No hope.
Right. And in your experience, how can I ask this? In your experience, what helps move people into that awakening, into that connectedness with life?
Slowing down. And that's the hardest thing for us today, because look how quickly we can come to answers. You just Google whatever you go, and bang, there it is. Doesn't take much effort. But of course, we have to use the technology, we live with it. But then what is the next moment? If we quickly have had an answer, at least if we can then come to, ensoul that thought and bring more to it. That yes, that's the physical, that's the reality, whatever. But then what's the bigger picture? And can we enliven that? So I did a little exercise, because I'm not good enough to know how the climate is in the different regions, north, south, northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere. And then I could see that the rainy season generally is in the summer. uh, and then the dry season is in the winter. But then what does it mean? So this picture that I began with in the beginning of, do we see this breathing? And so what does that mean then? Sort of what we know, what you know in Canada, suddenly it's white out. And you don't see anything anymore, and your mind can be totally with yourself because there's nothing to see. For us here, that could be more like fog, maybe, that suddenly is fog. It means you're freed of dealing with what's out there. And that's the condition then of winter. It means things are more on their own. Everything is on their own. And but that's sort of a bigger picture. Now I can get the facts quickly by checking on Wikipedia. But then how's the picture? How's the picture arising? Yeah, and does it? And so that's the work that we have to do more, because we get answers very quickly. And in a way we can't digest. We can't digest. There's so much. I think that's an example.
Right. The image that I'm getting is like all that cream that people buy to moisturize their skin, but they put it on their skin and it just sits on top. But we're wanting that instant gratification of nice, smooth, nourished skin when we miss so much when we're looking for those quick fixes. Powerful, Harold. Very powerful. We have a question here. I just want to ask it from Peter. Is it possible that making compost containing all the base ingredients of the various biodynamic amendments will encourage the same microbial populations to inhabit your garden over time without following individual amendment recipes?
So using materials from your place and anything using what else?
It sounds like it sounds like Peter, if I get this wrong, please clarify. Put up your hand and maybe we'll bring you on with Harold. He is wondering if it's possible to make compost containing all the base ingredients, so all the browns and the greens and stuff like that, and various biodynamic amendments. Will that encourage the same microbial populations to inhabit your garden over time without following individual amendment recipes? So are you wondering if you want to answer that? I'll let you go.
Yeah, I get more the picture, and that is of wholeness, I guess. And that so you take from wholeness, and because it's not like, oh, I have to put this in the compost to get this, I have to put that one in. Of course, you have to you have to take the things that your land provides. Some of them you have to get richer materials for your nitrogen, and then other for carbon, and put that in the right relationship. But it's never perfect. But you take it from the whole. And then when you use the preparations, the compost preparations, then you give an ordering principle that helps to have everything run more smoothly, and not, I do this for that, do that for this, but rather we create the preparations, or we use them like organs for an organism. And then they together create full health.
Yes.
Is that what you were looking for, Peter?
Yeah, and I think to clarify, he's wondering, so for example, in biodynamic preparations, for anybody who's new, we'll make a preparation out of stinging nettle, and we'll make a preparation out of the chamomile and out of the dandelion flowers. So what he's wondering is if we don't have those amendments, if we don't have those biodynamic preparations, can we just put stinging nettle and chamomile and dandelion into the compost pile, and will that evoke the same microbial and energetic movement in the pile as using the preparations if we
Ah,
don't?
yeah. Interesting question. Very good question.
Mhm.
Of course you can do that. And we may use that anyway. Stinging nettle makes the most beautiful compost if you have plenty of it. Not so much here where we live, but I knew from Europe. But it's still, there's a difference. And that is what we do in biodynamics with making preparations is putting things together that don't exist in nature. And that means we create a new, well, could almost call them evolutionary possibilities. Because see, how does manure get into a cow horn? Never in real life. Yeah. So we can do this, but then we make use of a function of an organ of the cow or the horn, and use the manure, that's sort of the end process of digestion, and we put those two together, and it's not the same any longer. Mm-hmm. And we have to, I think it's very good if we understand some of it. It's better than buy 500, which is the horn manure preparation, or just buy 501 to 507, that those are the compost preparations. That's kind of empty, but rather if you follow the processes and can go with it, it's incredible. It's incredible. So it's definitely more. And that is, again, in a certain way, you move from nature into culture. And by understanding nature, but using the parts of nature, but putting them together as in the best way that we could. That's the aim.
Mm-hmm. A comment, since you mentioned the cow manure and in the horn, a really common question we get a lot is, what other horns can we use? Can we use water buffalo horns,
okay. Yes.
sheep horns, that type of thing?
Okay, good. So definitely in what I've seen in Malaysia, Indonesia, is that the horns are tiny. They are so small, and there's hardly anything fits in them. Doesn't make for a very good preparation. And then if it's a little too dry, then very quickly you don't really gain enough. So there, I would definitely say buffalo horns are better, but you have to see if they're too large, can be a problem. I know the problem from here, from the Texas Longhorns. It's a very long horn coming from cow that comes originally from Texas. And that can sometimes be a problem that it doesn't break down well enough in the horn. But definitely I would do that. To fill a goat horn will be hard. It doesn't, not much fits into it. I've heard of people in Sweden who had a nice herd of goats, and they used cow horns and put the goat manure in there. They made their own preparation, did it for decades, because they were goat people. And that was, it worked. So I think we should all be open for experimenting, but it's good too if we can compare somehow. Or we say simply, it doesn't matter to me. I have a real deep inner connection to this animal, and that's why I want to use this. If you will get Demeter certification, it may be a different matter. Yeah, this is sort of, if you have larger scale and you need to be certified, that would be a different matter. But otherwise, if you feel, yes, I have that connection, and I want to have that as a practice to connect what I'm working with. Rudolf Steiner suggested if you use horse manure, well, maybe you put it in a cow horn, and then put maybe hair of the tail or whatever of the horse around it. There's definitely plenty of space for experimentation.
I love that, Harald. Thank you. And that goes back to that individuality of really deepening into listening and observing and noticing.
Yeah. What comes from the land? What wants to be there? And how can you make use of it? Yeah.
Good question. What is something that maybe I'm just wondering if you have an experience or a story where you can share with us where Biodynamics really like turned their their crops around or their experience of farming or gardening around?
There must be a lot. I don't have a particular one. Of course, I know stories. For instance, we didn't talk about this at all. Is making ashing, say pest problems. So like insects or also higher animal skins, and how that can really make a big difference in with the problem that you have on your land. I feel it's very powerful. It's the most benign way of working with pest problems, because you just take some insects and then burn them at particular times. So right now is, for instance, it's time for burning worms or larvae stage of insects. The grown insect maybe would be a little earlier already, and then make it into ash, white ash, grind it, and then apply it to the land where you have a problem. Maybe dilute it with more wood ash as an example. This can be very powerful. And when people do that with the proper attitude and, well, realizing it can happen and then seeing the change it can be very powerful. And of course, there's many other stories. I have not seen as much sort of striking thing at once, because I've used from the very beginning plenty of compost. Yeah.
Right. And so ashing, you can do that with weeds or with pests, right?
Exactly, both. Right.
And so when
Mhm.
you're ashing, Harold, are you just ashing, like, are you burning those um the insects or the weeds separately, not necessarily together,
Right.
and then just sprinkling the ashes, or are you putting them in water and applying
Uh,
them out that way, or
no,
do you do both?
you could possibly, but you don't have to. So like for the weeds, Rudolf Steiner didn't say very clearly in the lecture the timing. He talked about the lunar forces, that what comes from the moon originally, bringing the growth forces, and that we have to undermine those through the sun forces, but in this case also meaning actually that we burn. But the best time to do that will be actually before the new moon. So we have eliminated, so to say, these lunar forces, and at that point we send it through fire, and then that will be strengthened. I have personally had not had much good experiences with the wheat peppers, but more with the with rats. I've had very good experiences burning them, but that would be Venus and Scorpio, more in the winter half of the year. This year, last weekend of October. And that can really make a difference. But I normally thin enough the ash that I get with wood ash, and then stir that up or triturate it, make it firm, make it better, and then apply it, and it very sparsely. Rudolf Steiner said we have to imagine it's kind of like you make a soup and you put a little bit of pepper in there, and the whole thing will be, spicy.
Mhm.
So similar, we call them also the peppers, that it can make a difference. So, and then we have to realize that life radiates.
Mhm.
Yeah, when we have seeds, they radiate vitality. So I remember learning a long time ago that if you want to make cuttings, and maybe put some grains of wheat or whatever next to them, and that they would also stimulate the rooting.
Mm.
So that on the one hand, but also in the opposite way, the destructive way, it will also have raying out abilities. That means it doesn't need to be everywhere, but it spreads. This anti-force of growth will spread.
Very, very powerful. I did a bit of ashing with nettle, like with we had so many thistles. Oh my gosh, it was a wall of thistles. But I forgot that we actually did that. And you know, we did but we had a wall of thistles in our garden and in our strawberry patch anyways. And we had straw over top of them, and then we used biodynamic preparations, and I did do some ashing at the front of the field, and you know, within a couple of years there was hardly any thistles. Like I could walk through the whole field and maybe pick, I don't know, maybe 50 at the most. It was like almost 3/4 of an acre of strawberries. Because before it was just, you can put your hand up if you'd like to raise your hand and come on and ask a question. We have a few minutes left, or you can pop a question to the chat, but I just want to make sure we get to your questions before wrapping. Could you please explain the reason behind ashing, Harold?
Okay, good. So for growth to happen, you need to have certain conditions. So for plants to grow, actually, we need to have water. No plant will grow if you have the seeds and not water. So so this is the fourth, and what Rudolf Steiner relates to water as or to water is actually that it is related to the moon, yeah, and that it allows plants to grow. And so then as a counterforce, we use fire to work against it. So it's a simple way of making a difference in kind of creating more of a balance again. This is something that people in the past would do instinctively. You had a problem in the farm, you mow it and you rake it and you burn it. You had some weed problems, that's what farmers would do. But Rudolf Steiner gave an explanation. I can't do all of it now. I mean, for anyone who is really interested, I recommend to you that you try studying the agriculture lecturers. Try it with others. It's tough if you do it on your own. It's best to do it in a group, but you can also do it alone. And in there, in the 6th lecture, Rudolf Steiner goes into this. It's very interesting if you read it carefully. And similarly, then to the insects, we would burn the whole insect. And then actually, of course, we take its form away, and it can't be. But then from the higher animals, be it a rat or could be a deer, or whatever really gives you a lot of problem, you could just burn the skin. And then if you think how the skin is actually that what puts us in place that we can exist, because we have a separation between our inner being and the outer world. And so if that part is taken, there will be something like, how would I call it, a fear or an unwillingness or reluctance or whatever to be in this space. So it certainly has helped, but we have to understand that what is the form again? What is this about the skin? That and then the annihilation through the burning allows actually something to, or enables that you don't have to deal with it, but without using poisons. It's very different. It would take longer. Sorry.
No, thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for that. Peter's asked if Rudolf Steiner's lectures are available online. I know they're on Audible.
Yes.
You can get them on Audible, and there are some PDFs online, and I don't know.
Where? I would just even look, first of all.
Pardon me?
I would just look, Google.
Yeah, Google. Yeah, there's lots of.
And free, you can also ask for free.
Yeah.
If you do it, you may still want to give them a donation. This is Rudolf Steiner Archive or whatever. They're available in written form. Of course, you can't underline, at least I can't.
Oh, you're welcome, Peter. It's always awesome to be in the room with you, fabulous humans. It's so many good questions and such good energy, and we are deeply blessed we're deeply blessed to share these conversations with you and share this time with you and have these incredible farmers and gardeners and teachers and humans to come in and share their hearts and share their wisdom, share their life experiences with us. Harald, thank you so much for sharing your time today and
You're welcome.
sharing just a small sliver of the life that you've walked and what you're learning and what's opening up for you. I think it's, well, for me, it's incredibly inspirational to be in the room with you and to hear about just hear your curiosity, even after practicing and teaching biodynamics for decades, that you're still learning. And because I think it gives us all permission to be tender with ourselves and curious and be in a place of wonder, to not have everything right or you know, to have that recipe and follow it. It's more about being the observer and noticing.
Right.
Noticing what we notice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure for me to be here. And so I hope that this work will continue also, that more people will start looking at plants, and I hope to find more colleagues that within 25 years, maybe we have more answers for the topics.
Yes, yes. Amen to that. And Harald, Peter's asked if you have any favorite books on biodynamics that you'd recommend.
Well, the Agricultural Course by Rudolf Steiner. My first copy is quite tattered. That's the most important, really. I mean, I do have some other study too, but I don't read much. But the Agricultural Course I would do at least over all these decades. I do at least once a year, thoroughly working. But Peter, you have to work with others too, because they are tough. When I did it for the first time, I was ready to throw it out, and but I was urged to keep on going, and it did help. Yeah.
Well, I'm so curious, what turned you on to biodynamics?
It's real. It's the only real thing that I know.
And when did you know that it was real?
About 1980.
What happened?
Well, I did my apprenticeship, serious apprenticeship, for 2 years. I apprenticed in an anthroposophical psychiatric hospital that had a garden also for therapy. And I worked there, and well, and I grew up sort of in going through the challenge of being there. And yeah, then I thought, wow, there's a lot more. And but finally met my future wife there too. And yeah.
Wow.
It was worthwhile.
Thank you for all your support, for your questions, for your love, for the work that you do. We appreciate you. We love you, and we are standing with you in your next steps. And just know and trust you're exactly where you need to be right now. And all of life and all of the universe is organizing around your success and where you need to be and where you're headed. So standing with you on your journey and holding your hand, and we're here to support you. So big
Keep
love.
on going. Keep on
Yes,
going.
big love. Keep on going. Yeah, may you just see and experience the magic of life today and every day.
Okay.
Thanks, Harald.